Okay, hello. So this time we are going to change it up a little bit and actually do a build end to end. Basically starts with code changing in code commit all the way, and it's going to be fully automated to a point where it actually deploys a new version of our Docker image in ECS. Right. So the good news, there's a tutorial that's here. It says tutorial continuous deployment with CodePipeline. And if you look carefully at it, it has the prerequisites are exactly kind of where we left off the last video. We use code commit as a source control repository, right? That has basically a Docker file in it that we can do a build on. We've got a Docker image repository, ECR, which we are using, right? And we already have inside of our ECS, we have a task definition that's based on that Docker image, right? And we have an ECS cluster with a service that's actually running that task, right? So we pretty much have all the prerequisites for this. Now, one of the things that before I did this, I went in and I deleted the old build, code build project we had built from the last video. And it's going to be important you do that because when we're going to use a thing called pipelines, and when we do that, it'll actually have steps in here to actually rebuild that code build project, and it'll set some permissions up on the user that are proper. So, without it, it will actually fail. So delete the old code build, and then we go through the steps. Now, there's quite a few steps here, and I'm not going to necessarily do them all on video. I will point out any deviations that I took from this, though, because there were a couple. So basically, the first thing critical here is this updated version of the build spec YAML file that we did last time. We're going to change it. So let me go to my code. And let's look to see what's, and again, this is linked into the story, right? So you can look at this yourself. But I'll point out any deviations from the example that they gave. So this is more or less following what is in the article. The one deviation, though, was they had an old command for logging in their example, to ECR. So I used the updated version, right? Same one we've been using so far. Right. Actually, I just realized something. Let me pause the video. I'm going to fix one thing in this. Oh, I'll leave it. No, I will fix it. So hold on. So yeah, I wanted to fix one thing before I continued the video. So I just moved a couple lines around in this from just like 2 seconds ago. The main thing here is this generally follows the pattern that was in the example in the article that Amazon wrote, but I used the new login mechanism here as opposed to the old one, and that's the main difference. What I fixed here is that the new login method actually used the variable repository URI. I actually had hard-coded it previously at the end, so now it's here. Basically what's happening here is, just to sketch out what's happening in this file, you log into the repository like we did in the previous example. This time, though, we actually calculate a new string that basically we're going to tag our images with, right? So that's what this is going on here, is basically calculating based on the commit hash a new tag name, right? And we do the build before we build it to the repository with latest, but we also tag it with another image tag that's specific to this build, basically. So now in the repository now we have both the latest and the specific tag pointing at the same Docker file. And then the key here is we both push both up latest and the tag, right? And then and then we basically output a file that's this image definitions file which is basically got a link saying this to-do-us task is pointing to essentially this specific this value $S is actually the image tag version of the Docker image. So this file becomes an output of the build, and that output becomes the input of ECS, which can take that image definition and trigger a deployment, specifically changing out that task's Docker image, basically is what it does. So, so a lot of things happen automatically, but the key here was this is more or less the same file, just some changes to accommodate sort of the new login mechanisms and specifics for our project. Okay, we commit that code basically in, right? And let's go back to the article. That's what this is all about here. This is just telling you how to commit it. Here you're going to create the pipeline, right? And I'm going to show you, pretty much you're going to follow all these steps. Right about here where they say choose Amazon Linux 2, this will not work because that's these are old, basically, instructions. And I'll just show you where I deviated right about in here and specifically what I changed. Otherwise, this is basically identical all the way through the end. Okay, so let me go into when you're in the process of doing your building your build project. One of the settings that I specifically changed is when you're in the process of picking basically the image that you're going to run your build on. They talk about using Amazon Linux 2, right? The documentation now suggests you should be using Ubuntu, right? So so now I used Ubuntu, and I used the code build standard 4.0, which is the latest version of that, and that's the main changes right there. With those changes, everything ends up working. Okay, so bottom line is, if you do all this work, go back to developer tools. I go to code. I'll go back to here and just go straight to CodePipeline. So what will happen is, if you go through the steps, now I actually just triggered a new one here a minute ago, but what you'll do is every time you commit code to your master branch of your code commit repository, right? That'll trigger a build, which triggers a deployment, and it'll deploy that new version of the Docker file, basically. And you can see that this deployment takes about 10 minutes here, and we can actually, it's in progress right now. So you can see that it's actually doing its thing, because if you go to ECS, you will see, if I can find it, catch it fast enough, there's probably more than 3 tasks running right now. Oh, actually just finished. Looks like it just finished. Let me see. Services. I think it just finished, so I won't see it, but I can look under deployments and see. Yes, it's got that. So it looks like it already deployed. It's only got down to 3, and 7:40. Yeah, that was just like 1 minute ago. So that literally just finished. Let me go back to CodePipeline. It should observe that it's finished. Oh yeah, now it's already finished. So when it's all successful, you'll get greens all the way down the line. Okay, so this was kind of a short video. Key to all this is following the steps in this article with the deviations that I mentioned, and those again were specifically the changes to the YAML file just to accommodate this newer style login. That's the old one, right? And then the other change was, along that same line, I changed out from the Amazon Linux 2 to basically using Ubuntu, and I used version 4 of their image, not version 2, because that was probably the version at the time. Otherwise, it all worked exactly as the article suggested. That's it.